At 87, Anthony Hopkins finally tells the truth about Laurence Olivier. Anthony Hopkins was born Philip Anthony Hopkins on December 31, 1937, in the small Welsh town of Port Talbot. He came from a simple background to become one of the most respected and talented actors of our time. His father, Richard Arthur Hopkins, was a baker, and his mother, Annie Muriel, took care of the family with love and strength. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood, young Hopkins often felt like he didn't fit in at regular school. Instead, he loved the arts, feeling naturally drawn to drawing, music, and later acting. These early experiences built the foundation for a creative spirit that would one day amaze audiences around the world. Hopkins trained at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama before spending 2 years in the British Army. In 1961, he got accepted into the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, one of the best acting schools in the world. His time at RADA gave him not only skills and discipline, but also the confidence to pursue a professional stage career. It wasn't long before he got noticed by Sir Laurence Olivier, who invited him to join the National Theatre. Hopkins later said Olivier was an important mentor, and this time became a life-changing chapter in his artistic growth through stage roles in Shakespeare's tragedies and modern plays. He developed the powerful voice, emotional control, and quiet intensity that would become his signature style. His move to film was slow but powerful. Hopkins's early roles, including The Lion in Winter in 1968, showed a special talent capable of playing noble complexity and deep emotion. Yet, his worldwide breakthrough came decades later in 1991 when he gave his unforgettable performance as Dr. Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs, in a role that required scary calmness, creepy intelligence, and an almost magical presence. Hopkins created an iconic screen villain whose frightening politeness continues to disturb audiences, despite only appearing on screen for about 16 minutes. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor, proving that true mastery isn't measured by how long you're on screen, but by how deep your impact is. Hopkins continued to build a remarkable collection of films showing his range in types ranging from psychological drama to historical epics. In films such as The Remains of the Day in 1993, he played a dignified but emotionally closed off butler whose internal struggles showed the actor's gift for subtle, layered performance. His portrayal of Richard Nixon in Oliver Stone's Nixon in 1995 displayed the courage of an actor willing to play real-life people with raw honesty and complexity. Whether playing a troubled missionary in The Mission, a loyal but aging advisor in Thor, or the suffering father in The Father in 2020. A performance so powerful that it earned him his second Academy Award at age 83. Hopkins always proved that great acting is as much about being vulnerable as it is about being strong. Beyond film, Hopkins is equally admired for his work in television and on stage. His performance as Dr. Ford in Westworld brought him to a new generation of viewers who found his ability to blend tenderness, scariness, and deep thinking nothing short of mesmerizing. And throughout his life, he has stayed deeply connected to music. A skilled piano player and composer, he has written symphonies and performed with orchestras, showing a lifelong passion for the emotional language of sound. These creative activities offer a more personal portrait of a man for whom art is not just a job, but the very meaning of life. Despite his success, Anthony Hopkins's life includes personal battles that give even more weight to his achievements. He openly talked about his struggles with alcoholism, which he overcame in 1975. His journey to sobriety marked a huge turning point, empowering him to take back his focus, confidence, and clarity. His strength and willingness to speak honestly about difficult experiences have made him an inspiration not only to actors, but to anyone facing their own problems. Over time, Hopkins developed a way of thinking centered on acceptance, self-forgiveness, and emotional peace, values that come through strongly in his motivational speeches and interviews. Throughout his long and distinguished television career, Anthony Hopkins built a legacy every bit as commanding as his work in movies. His television achievements began earning major recognition early on, most notably when he delivered a gripping performance in the 1972 version of War and Peace, a portrayal so layered and disciplined that it won him the British Academy Television Award for Best Actor. This role showed his extraordinary ability to bring emotional depth, psychological detail, and magnetic presence to classic book characters, qualities that would define his work for decades. Hopkins's dominance in television continued into the late 1970s and early 1980s, when he took on some of the most challenging biographical roles of his career. His chilling, tightly controlled depiction of Charles Lindbergh in the Lindbergh kidnapping case in 1976 earned him his first Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor. Confirming what critics had already recognized, Hopkins had a rare gift for playing complex historical people with both precision and emotional power. Only a few years later, he delivered another unforgettable performance as Adolf Hitler in The Bunker in 1981. This portrayal, disturbing yet spellbinding in its intensity, won him his second Primetime Emmy Award and sealed his reputation as one of television's most fearless and transformative actors. Even after becoming an international film icon, Hopkins continued to return to television for roles that challenged him artistically. In the BBC's 2015 film, The Dresser, he starred alongside Ian McKellen in a moving exploration of aging, friendship, and the painful pressures of a life spent on stage. His performance was widely praised for its quiet vulnerability and emotional honesty. He then took on the huge role of King Lear in PBS's King Lear in 2018, delivering a powerful interpretation of Shakespeare's tragic king, marked by raw emotional intensity and a heartbreaking portrayal of crumbling authority. Anthony Hopkins's personal life has been marked by 3 important marriages, each one happening during a different chapter of his career and personal growth. His first marriage was to Petronella Barker, whom he married in 1966 at a time when he was still building himself up as a rising talent on the British stage and beginning to enter the world of film and television. Barker, an English actress, shared his early creative life, and together they dealt with the pressures that come with an emerging career in acting, long rehearsals, demanding performance schedules, and the unpredictability of professional success. During their marriage, they welcomed a daughter, Abigail. But Hopkins's intense focus on work and his struggles with alcoholism created major strain at home. By 1972, the marriage had ended, leaving him with complicated emotions about fatherhood and personal responsibility. Despite the difficulties, this period deeply shaped him, teaching him hard lessons about ambition, relationships, and the sacrifices demanded by a life in the performing arts. Just a year after his first divorce, Hopkins entered a second, long and important marriage with Jennifer Linton, whom he married in 1973. Linton was not an actress, but a film production assistant and later administrator, someone deeply familiar with the inner workings of the entertainment industry, yet not part of its spotlight. Her calm personality and organizational skill provided Hopkins with stability during some of the most life-changing decades of his career. Throughout the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, as Hopkins rose to worldwide recognition from acclaimed stage productions, 2 major Hollywood films, Linton became a grounding presence. She helped create a home environment where he could retreat from the pressures of fame, and she stayed strong through his battles with alcoholism until he finally achieved sobriety in 1975. Their marriage endured the demands of his international work schedule, including long periods when he lived in the United States while she remained in London due to her own career. This distance, though manageable for a long time, eventually contributed to the relationship's gradual emotional separation. After almost 3 decades together, one of the longest relationships of his life, The marriage ended in 2002, marking the close of an era that had supported him through the most defining stages of his professional success. In 2003, Anthony Hopkins married Stella Arroeve, a Colombian-born antique dealer and artist who brought a completely different energy into his life. They met when Arroeve was working at an antique shop in Los Angeles, and Hopkins has often spoken warmly about how her presence brought him back to life at a time when he had been feeling emotionally adrift. Arroeve, much younger than Hopkins, had a vibrant personality and a joyful enthusiasm that dramatically shifted the tone of his later years. Unlike the chaos of his early life, his marriage to Arroeve has been characterized by peace, creativity, and companionship. She encouraged him to explore new parts of himself: painting, composing, charity work, and a renewed appreciation for day-to-day life beyond the pressures of acting. Hopkins credits her with helping him overcome periods of depression and emotional isolation, describing her as an uplifting force who brought lightness and stability into his world. Together, they have created a warm, artistic home life in California, far removed from the anxieties of his early career, and their marriage continues to flourish, symbolizing strength, personal growth, and the possibility of finding transformation at any stage of life. At 87, Anthony Hopkins finally felt free to speak with complete honesty about the legendary Laurence Olivier, his mentor, rival, inspiration, and at times the source of his deepest insecurities. With decades of distance separating him from the awe-filled chaos of his early career, Hopkins began opening up in interviews and conversations, revealing the complex truth about a man he once looked up to almost as a mythic figure. Olivier was a giant, Hopkins said, and when you were standing in his shadow, you knew it. You felt it in your bones. Hopkins often described their first meetings at the National Theatre in the late 1960s as overwhelming, almost surreal. He was a young, hungry actor from Wales, stepping into an institution Olivier had shaped with his own towering personality. I felt like I was walking into a cathedral where Olivier was the high priest, Hopkins recalled. Everything revolved around him, his voice, his movements, his sheer power. It was intimidating in a way I had never experienced before. That intimidation pushed Hopkins to sharpen every instinct he had. He believed he would have drowned in such an environment if he hadn't fought to hold his ground. Yet, he also admitted that Olivier could be amazingly kind and generous when he chose to be. Hopkins remembered moments when the older actor offered small but life-changing pieces of wisdom, advice on breathing, on pacing, on owning the stage rather than simply appearing on it. He had this ability to cut through all the nonsense with a single sentence, Hopkins explained. He'd say something like, "Don't act, just be." And suddenly, I understood exactly what he meant. But Hopkins also revealed the difficult side of the man, a side rarely spoken about publicly during Olivier's lifetime. He acknowledged that Olivier could be fiercely competitive, even threatened, especially by talented young actors who showed unusual promise. There were days when he could be charming, and days when he could absolutely tear you apart, Hopkins said. He didn't like being challenged. I think he saw parts of himself in me, the ambition, the stubbornness, and that made things complicated. Hopkins admitted that he often felt crushed under the pressure to please Olivier, to earn his approval, and to avoid triggering the older actor's unpredictable temper. One of the biggest revelations Hopkins shared was how deeply he struggled with self-doubt during that time. Despite his huge skill, he often felt like a fraud. I was terrified, he confessed. Olivier was the sun, and I thought I was just some asteroid drifting in, about to burn up. I kept waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, "All right, Hopkins, fun's over. Back to Wales with you." That fear drove him to work with an intensity that sometimes bordered on obsession. Hopkins also talked about how his relationship with Olivier shaped his later career, not just technically, but emotionally. He admitted that he learned both what to copy and what to avoid. "He taught me greatness," Hopkins said, "but he also taught me the dangers of chasing perfection." Olivier wanted to be flawless, and that's impossible. I learned from watching him not to torture myself in that way. Over time, Hopkins came to a place of deep gratitude for the turbulent mentorship. Even the conflicts, the intensity, and the moments of strain helped shape him into the actor the world came to admire. "Whatever our differences," he reflected, "I owe him a debt I can never repay. Without Olivier, I wouldn't be who I am. He scared me into becoming better." Finally, with the clarity of age, Hopkins summed up the truth he had carried for years. Laurence Olivier was extraordinary, brilliant, flawed, vulnerable, intimidating, a true titan, and I was lucky, unbelievably lucky, to have stood in his orbit long enough to learn anything at all.